Hey, good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Those of you joining all the way from islands out in the Pacific, I appreciate you making the effort. I know it's so early. And good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast here. It's kind of a foggy, rainy day, but I'll take any day that's out there. I turn foggy and rainy and into a good attitude and just say, well, at least it's not smothering hot. And anybody who went to the Navy Gold Coast knows what smothering hot's like, I think, right? So we're going to get rock and rolling here in a second, but I wanted to give a quick tip. I like giving a tip when I can to people who show up early and on time and just say thank you, because when you show up early and on time, LinkedIn then is letting everybody else know, hey, we're getting started, come join us. And this tip is also related to what we're going to talk about today on 6 things that small businesses must stop doing in the federal market, 6 mistakes, if you will. But I wanted to bring it back to something personal that I ran into yesterday with my family here, right? My wife, Nancy, and our 2 boys. We were dealing with it felt like allergies and other stuff. We're like, what's going on? And my wife and I were talking about this $5,000 fancy purchase for the furnace or something that electrocutes the dust and brings things in. And we were discussing that. Should we consider doing that purchase, et cetera? Long story short, we said, well, let's just check the filters. Maybe the filters are dirty. And we look at them and they're filthy, right? Like if you've ever left your filters too long, they get dusty and they needed to be changed. We changed them in the morning. And by the end of the day, all of us were feeling better, especially I got 2 8-year-old boys. They were feeling better. You could just see it. And this morning they woke up and they were feeling great. Good night's sleep. Everything just was way better because we changed the filter, not some massive expensive purchase of $5,000. And my point is, more often than not, the simple solution is going to solve the challenges we face. The simple solutions could lead to the goals we want to achieve. And in today, that's what I'm going to be talking to you about is 6 mistakes. And I'm going to provide you tips in there. But don't look for miracles, right? If this is your first time coming to training with me, I don't provide miracles. I provide process. And process is changing your air filter so the dust can then be captured again and life is better. So think of it that way as we move forward. I'm going to dive into today's training. In this training, I want to share with you 6 mistakes that small businesses make that you need to stop making right away if you want success in the federal market. I'm also going to share with you steps or tips that you can take immediately to stop making all 6 mistakes. Not just one, but all 6. You could turn them around so that Monday morning when you come back to work, if you're watching this today on Friday, it's the end of the fiscal year, so Friday the 30th, right? Coming in on Monday, you have tips that can turn you around right following this training. And if that sounds something you'd value to learn today, then do me a favor, put "I'm ready to learn" into the chat. Let everybody know that you're ready to learn. What are the 6 mistakes, Neil, and how can I sit there and fix them and start moving forward? And by the way, if you don't know who I am Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live federal sales training, where I teach process and procedures for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people just like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's a process. When we follow the process, we achieve predictable results. And that's what we all want, right? That's what you want. So I appreciate it. I'm looking over the chat. I can see people chatting in there. If you don't know this, I don't pay attention to the chat much once I really get going with the training. So that way I can focus on the training. But I want you to be engaged in the chat. And actually, before we get started, do me a favor, help buyers and me remember who you are by putting your company name into the chat with 2 or 3 keywords that describe your core competency. Make it easy for me and your buyers and the people in the community to remember who you are. And do this every day. Don't ever feel like you're doing it too much. You can't do it too much. One last thing, as we go along in this training, engage with each other in the chat. This is your community. This is a place where you can meet teaming partners. This is a place where you can meet people across the country. If you're trying to get into San Antonio or if you're trying to go after something in Guam, right? This is a place where you can begin to meet potential teaming partners, certainly professional friends. And I'm so excited about it every day when I hear of 2 of you getting together and going offline and beginning to build a relationship. So that's exciting. And then also let me know that you hear me. Today, we're going to do a lot of this. If you hear me and understand me, put into the chat what I'm asking for as I go along. So that way I can see it afterwards, but throughout the training, the rest of you in the community, everybody else in the community can see what you're saying. All right, we're going to go pretty fast. I have a lot to hit. 6 tips I'm going to try to get done in, what do I got? 25 minutes. I did pretty good there. 25 minutes, we're going to roll through pretty fast. I will tell you just really quick, the 6 mistakes, and then I'm going to dive into them, and then I'll give you a tip in there. So starting off, the 6 tips I'm going to talk about is having FOMO, fear of missing out, failing to plan, talking to late adopters. We'll talk about that in a second. Increasing friction between you and your buyer, swinging for the fences. That's a baseball reference of trying to get a home run. And then showing up late to the dance, showing up late in the federal life cycle. And so I'll talk about that as well. We're going to go through those 6 mistakes. So let's start with having fear of missing out, or FOMO. And this is a big thing. We look to the right, we look to the left. You might think about it of looking over to your neighbor's fence. The grass is always greener there. But the reality is you got to deal with, you have to have focus. And when you have focus, you won't be looking to what you might be missing out on because you'll be so busy developing what you want to go after. And examples of fear of missing out is if you say you want to go after the, let's say the Navy, but you let yourself be distracted by DHS or the Army. Well, you're doing that because you fear that there's opportunities over there that you might be missing out on. But if you try to go after DHS, the Army, the Navy, whoever, and all of them at the same time, because you're going after them, you're not going to really do any service to any one of them. And you're certainly not going to do service to your own company of understanding that one agency. And so looking at multiple agencies. The other is not focusing on a core competency. I work with customers all the time. And the first thing I say to them is, let's go back to the beginning. You need to know what you sell. You need to be so solid on it. So when you go in and talk to a customer, they'll understand it. Today, I put somebody's capability statement out onto my LinkedIn post, and I'm sharing it broadly. And the point I was trying to make is their capability statement is not going to win any graphics awards, best looking capability statement. But that is a 6-second capability statement that is hyper-focused on Microsoft 365 and SharePoint. This is what we do. This is who we do it for. And so having that focus on one core comp allows you to drive into a particular set of opportunities and try to develop those opportunities instead of going over here to cyber or over here to, hey, somebody offered me this opportunity in enterprise architecture, whatever it is, like getting pulled into other areas than your core competency. And the most important thing to remember about FOMO is a reactive approach to business. Fear of missing out is a reactive approach to business, not a proactive approach, right? You want a proactive approach that will lead you to the goals that you have set for yourself in the agencies you have determined are your ideal target customer. And so the one thing I want you to do, the tip for this mistake about having FOMO is today or Monday at the latest, right? Focus on one core competency. Be able to communicate very clearly one core comp. I say to you, put in 2 or 3 words into the chat to let me know. And so if you're able to put 2 or 3 words, then maybe you've come down to that one core comp. If you have a problem doing that, then you haven't. Somebody in here, I'm sorry, I can't remember the names, but somebody in here had a lot of words that came all the way down to workforce. And I loved it because it's like, good, it's workforce development. Now you can expand off the word workforce. So my tip for you is focus on one core comp. If it makes sense what I'm saying, that FOMO is a reactive approach and you want to be proactive, put in the chat, be proactive. 2 words, be proactive. In fact, be proactive and put that in the chat. Okay, so I'll move on to the second tip. So this one is failing to plan. A mistake that we make as small businesses sometimes is we fail to plan. We just are scattershot. We run over there, we run to this event, we hear HUD is having an event, we go there, we're moving around. That's not a plan, right? That is just chasing squirrels is what we call it, or shiny objects. You're just going wherever. And again, it's a reactive thing. But failing to plan is planning to fail. So if you don't plan, you're kind of planning to fail. But if you plan to succeed, you will succeed. And that's what I want you to do, right? An example is, and I'm going to share my an image really quick. And thanks for putting stuff in the chat. I just saw that really quick and I appreciate that. I want to share an image here. This one, hopefully I got the right one. So I know I'm off screen, but you see this image. This is part of another training that I did on how do you plan out how much money should be in your pipeline, et cetera. But the part I really want you to pay attention to is at the top. How much money do you want for FY23? Right? If you look out your fiscal year, not the government's fiscal year. So let's say it's going to end December 23. By the end of the year, how much money, revenue, do you want to have generated? in that 12-month cycle, or let's call it 18 months with the 3 months here, right? But what amount of money? Say you're at 0 and you want to be at 100,000, or you're at $1 million and you want to be at 2 million, which is 100% growth, which is very respectable. Whatever that number is here in the annual contract value, and don't go overly crazy about what that number means. It just means we did this much work and the government paid us this much money. It's like, I'm not trying to get into fancy CFO number or words and things like that. Just how much money do you want in your pocket, in your company's pocket by the end of 2023? And let's say you want to be a $5 million a year company by the end of 23. Well, if you begin to back this up, most contracts are 5-year contracts. And so that means you need to win $25 million in contract value in order to get $5 million next year. Hopefully that makes sense. And then what I use is just rough numbers. If you don't have your own data, my numbers are good enough. But what I say is 1 out of every 4 proposals you submit will win. If that's the case, then if you want 25 million in total winning contract value, then you need 100 million going out the door. And not one contract, by the way. It's you win 1 out of every 4. So you need to submit at least 4 $25 million contract value proposals. So, and then backing it up, I don't want to go too far into this, but backing it up, you then have your number for how much needs to be into my pipeline at a bid stage, which is, let's say, the late stage maturity of the capture phases. So not qualified, not pursue, but the bid phase is right before getting the RFP. And that's where you're doing a lot of your heavy work. You're starting to do solutioning, et cetera. Well, I just multiply that by 4 as well and say, okay, you need 400 million in the pipeline. You can begin to have your own numbers. I don't want to get into that, but understand that thing right there. And it comes down to, what are your numbers? Do you know what they are? And that's my tip for you, is determine a realistic revenue goal for 2023, right? Don't make it astronomical. Those are stretch goals, but what's a realistic goal for next year? And if you have that, then you will begin to understand what's how many proposals need to go out the door, how much value they must have, and how much you must have in your pipeline, things like that. That's planning, right? That's planning from a dollar perspective. Later on, you can plan from a targeted customer, like we're going to get that from the Navy or whoever. But my point is, I want to just give you one tip and determine that number. Know how much you want. It's the first question I ask people when I'm talking to them about achieving the revenue goals is, well, what is your revenue goal? So have that on there. If you understand what I'm saying here about failing to plan is planning to fail, and understand the tip that I'm talking about determining your goal, which will help you determine all your activity before then, put in, I'm a planner. If you're going to plan this out, if you're going to sit there and do this number so you know where you're going instead of reacting, put I'm a planner into the chat. Okay, so the next one, number 3, talking to late adopters. This one's a huge one for me, and I'm going to show you another picture here while you're typing in I'm a planner. Some of you have seen this before, but you can never see the things I show you too much here, because they just drive into our memory what we want to pay attention to. So what I just said was, you're talking to late adopters, or late majority and laggards is what these 2 groups are. But this is the bell curve. And right now it says adoption bell curve. I could use different titles, but just think of it as the bell curve. Half the bell curve will work with you. Half of the bell curve will not work with you. That's just a fact of life. So right down the middle, 50% are not going to work with you. And what I'm suggesting is that you're talking to laggards and late majority, and these are the people who are never going to work with you. And it doesn't mean they're mean. It just means they're not going to turn into business. And so I'm going to turn this image off for a second to keep talking to you about it. But understand this, right? There's the left-hand side of the bell curve. These are the people who are going to work with you. And the right-hand side, what it means is 50% are not going to work with you, right? Okay, so my point is, when you look at the people you're talking to, if you're a software company and somebody asks for a demo, but they're never moving you forward. I watched somebody do an article, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who did this on LinkedIn, but they were talking about how they had spent time talking to a contracting officer representative, a core, for like 12 months or something. And they kept saying they were a contracting officer, but they're not. My point is, that person was never going to move forward. You need to learn how to identify these people, and that they're late adopters or laggards, late majority, the people who are not going to work with you. You need to understand that. And the way you would understand that is by, if you had a call plan, the next time you meet with them, you would have an objective. Hey, I would like you to introduce me to the program office. I would like you to sign an NDA with me. I would like you to get me a draft PWS, whatever it is. If they're not getting you something that's moving the sale forward, then they're probably not going to work for you, right? And it doesn't need to be one and done, like if they don't do the one thing, but it doesn't take you long, few weeks, let's say, before you should be able to identify that, you know what, I'm working with a laggard in the late majority, those people who won't work with me. Again, they're not bad people. I'm a laggard in certain things, and I'm an innovator in other things. And so we all fit into those, but you need to understand that the longer you talk to the late majority and laggards, it means you're not finding the innovators, and early adopters, that left side of the bell curve, are the ones who want to buy from you or put you on their team, et cetera. So here's my tip for you. Review your relationships, the people you're meeting with next week, let's say, and dump the laggards, right? It doesn't mean it in a bad way, but just kind of don't schedule a follow-on meeting. But if you meet with them next week, somebody you're meeting with next week or the week after, determine, are they helping you move forward in your sale? If they're not, then it's just not a need for that relationship right now. And then you can redirect your energy. So review the relationships, dump the laggards. If you understand what I'm saying here about don't talk to the late adopters, and our mistake is that we end up talking to laggards and late majority there, put know the bell curve. Know the bell curve, and KNOW, know the bell curve. So I want you to understand the bell curve fits every aspect of your life. And I'm going to do like a whole week's worth of training just on the bell curve. That's how important the bell curve is, because it focuses your energy. All right, so let's move to number 4. Number 4 is a mistake we make is that we're increasing friction. And in this particular case, friction is between us and the buyer. Let's just talk about us and the buyer for a second. What I mean by friction is the buyer is here and I'm here. Anything that I put between us that prevents them from easily reaching me or me reaching them, anything I put in there is friction, and we want to remove the friction. So an example of friction could be gating content. I'll give you 2 examples of friction, one that bothers me and hopefully DoD changes it, and one that you might be doing. So one that you might be doing is gating your capability statement on your website. I have been to websites where people require me to put in an email address or some information to get their capability statement. That's friction. You've just created friction. So much friction that I'm like, I'm out of here. Like, I don't even care. And what you want is you want your capability statement to be downloaded without any friction at all. In fact, to make it super frictionless, you should, when I land on the page for your capability statement, I should just see it instantly. There it is. And I can click a button if I want to download it. So I don't have to click on a button to first see it and then download it, if that makes sense. So that's one example. The PTACs do all this training out there. And because of the friction, DOD and DLA is not there anymore, but not involved anymore. But because of the friction that they put in place, PTACs end up gating their content. So none of us businesses can come in and look at past events without having to sign in and do all these, jump through hoops. And am I in this state? It doesn't make any sense. If DOD is really trying to grow the industry, they shouldn't have that friction there. And actually, the less friction they had, they'd probably have more of us going to PTACs because we see how valuable they are. We're not showing up live. Sometimes we're on replay. So those are examples of friction. Another example, and this is vital, is not being where the buyer looks. I said, if you have friction in between where the buyer is trying to reach you, well, if the buyer is looking at DSBS, if the buyer is looking at NavSup's portal for small businesses, if the buyer is looking for you, but you're not visible in the tools they're looking at, you've created friction. And so I talked to you about go into DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search Tool. Go into that, completely fill out your portal. So when they search for an 8A cyber company, bam, you come right up and as one of the options. Doesn't mean you're going to win a contract. Doesn't even mean you're going to get called, but at least you come up before their eyes. If you're not in there, or if you're not in the HHS portal, if you're not in the Booz Allen portal, if you're not where the buyers are looking, then you've created friction because now they have to figure out how hard to get to you. Well, no one's going through all that friction just to get to you. Hopefully that makes sense. Last thing is, and I'll combine this, is your capability statement needs to be easy to find. The tip for you is add your capability statement to LinkedIn. This is my one tip, right? I'm trying to keep it to one tip. Add your capability statement into LinkedIn today. Just, it doesn't matter what state it is. It's your current capability statement. So add it into LinkedIn in your experience section. If you go into your experience section You can modify your profile and just add it. It takes you literally 2 minutes or less, right? Do that. And now potentially you've reduced the friction between teammates and buyers and you and your company. So if that makes sense and you want to reduce the friction between you and your buyers, you and your teammates, and you want to be more visible to them, put be visible into the chat. Be visible. Oh, sorry, just realized that silly scroll bar is killing me. Hopefully that didn't bother you too much. Okay, so we're down 4. We got 2 more. This last one, this next one, swinging for the fences, it's a harder one for me because I put it into the training. I don't like using references generally to sports because we don't all play the same sports. We don't all know the same sports. But swinging for the fences, just to get us all on the same page, is basically trying to get a home run in baseball. So if you're not familiar, baseball's got basically 4 bases, first, second, third, and home. And people who try to score by going home try to swing for the fences, right? It's much better for us if we just get on base. If every one of us tries to get on base in baseball, then the next person pushes me to second base, and then the next person pushes us both base forward, and you're scoring all day long. Go watch a movie called Moneyball if you want to know my reference. But my point is, in baseball, only 12% of the hits, not the swings, but the hits are, and let's call those proposals, only 12% of them are home runs, right? And what I want you to understand is that we're not trying to land these big, huge contracts, 50 million, 25 million. If you're a smaller company, you should be swinging at the right level. And sometimes we get in, it's like, oh, here's a $50 million contract we got to go after. Well, if you're a $5 million firm, why are you going after $50 million contracts? If you do it as a sub, that's perfect. Do that all day long. But as a prime, and you're a $5 million firm, for example, then you should just be trying to land a, let's say, a $2 to $5 million a year contract at your target agency, right? That's a good stretch goal because that's going to give you 100% growth. And if you're doing that at a couple of commands or agencies within your departments, you'll get it. But the idea is we swing way too far. And if you're below 5 million, I mean, you can still do this if you're over 5 million, but if you're below 5 million, under 3 million, under 1 million, you should be going after these simplified acquisition, contracts, these $250,000 or less. Those are set aside for small business, right? Swinging for the fences means you're going after contracts that are have more and more competition, and you want to reduce the amount of competition. One way you can do that is just getting on base, getting a single instead of swinging for the home run. And in government contracting, that's simplified acquisition. And so my tip for you on that is go meet with your small business specialist at your ideal customer, let's say the Navy or DHS or CDC, one component in a department. Go meet with them and ask them to teach you about simplified acquisition. And I don't mean one day. Meet with them like 4 or 5 times and begin to learn more and more, because how is that purchasing happening? There's a whole set of training. I could do 5-day trainings just on simplified acquisition, but there's a whole bunch in there. And the person who's going to teach you is the contracting officer, the small business specialist in your target agency. But find out about those opportunities and be on their radar. If you're on their radar, you will hear about them even more. So if you understand what I'm saying, that it's a mistake to be swinging for the fences, swinging for those stretch goals all the time, then just put get on base into the chat. Let me know you're tracking on that tip and mistake I'm talking about. And so the last one is showing up late. And in this particular one, we're talking about the 7-step process. Let me show that to you really quick. For those of you who might not have seen it, the 7-step process for federal revenue success that I have laid out is, and I like going backwards, right? If you want sales, then you must submit winning proposals. In order to submit winning proposals, you must have slam dunk opportunities in your pipeline. That means opportunities that are yours to win. And in order to have opportunities, you must have relationships in place so you can hear about the opportunities long before they hit sam.gov, for example. And in order to develop relationships, you must have targeted and outreach to the people you want to meet. And all of that means you're visible so that when they're looking for you, you look good. And so that's just a very quick way of me talking about the 7-step process. The mistake I want to bring up for you is that we show up late. Often, most of us show up in the proposal stage of what I just showed you. And the reason I say that is even RFIs I kind of put in there, we're showing up in the writing phase. The opportunity phase is business development and capture. The whole point of business development is to build relationships within an agency and learn about them and to identify opportunities that can go into your pipeline. So that opportunity part of the process, that's about the whole business development and capture phase. And most of us are in the writing thing. We see an RFI, we respond. We see an RFP, we respond. What I want you to do, and what I want to recommend you do, is that you move left in the process. Move further into the opportunity phase to make sure you're putting good slam dunk opportunities into your pipeline. Have strategic relationships. Do you have a number of strategic relationships that you should be reaching? Like, do you and your team know how many strategic relationships do we want? How many larges, smalls, hub zones, woman-owned firms do we want to have strategic relationships with so we never miss an opportunity that goes set aside or goes out on Oasis, that kind of thing, right? And all of that is going back into targeting and outreach. Do you know which agency you want to go into? Do you know what you sell? Are you communicating who you are so people can know, like, and trust you? When you look at the 7-step process, I started with sales and I reverse engineered it or went backwards through the process. And that's what I want to recommend for you. The tip is today on how you can go back and start showing up earlier instead of late in the process is create a list of 50 people in your target agency. 50 people. Yesterday, the day before, and the day before that, I showed you how to do it at FAA, DHS, and Navy, right? I gave you examples of how you could do it. So 50 people in your target program office. Not small business professionals, not contracting professionals, but program office people. Create a list of 50 people. That's the tip, so that you can start calling, reaching out to them and calling and meeting with them. That's not the tip. The tip is just create the 50 names so that you can start that process of outreach. And when you do that, you'll show up earlier in the life cycle to the process within your target customer. So if that makes sense, what I'm saying, put shift left into the chat. Let me know that you're hearing me and you understand that the sooner we show up, the more we can get engaged with our customers. Okay, I'm doing awesome on time, even though I blew through 6 steps. So just a reminder of because I did so fast, I just want to recap what I just talked about. And then I want to tell you one last thing. FOMO, the way you get past FOMO is to have one core competency that keeps you and your team focused. Failing to plan, the tip is create a realistic goal for 2023. That's just one part of planning, right? There's all sorts of training I do on planning, but do that one. Talking to late adopters, just review your relationships and get rid of the ones that are not currently helpful to you and go find new relationships. Increasing friction, get your capability statement into LinkedIn. Swinging for the fences, just talk with your small business professional at your target agency and ask them to really help you understand simplified acquisition in their buying command or whatever. And then the last one, showing up late. The tip for you is to show up earlier in the process by creating 50 people in the program office for your target agency that you can reach out to. All right, the last thing I want to say is this is really important, actually. I mean, it's all really important, but starting next week, I'm going to start inviting a whole new group of businesses and connections that I have. I have 18,000 followers, and I want to get more people into our community so that you can meet more people. Obviously, I'd love to have more people watching my training, but I want to build this community because it's so exciting to see it grow. And so if you've been coming to training 2, 3, 4 times in the past, or 20 or 30 or 50 times in the past, because I think we're over 125, connect with Gus Phelps. He's on my team. You see him right there. Gus, if you're ahead of the curve, maybe you dump your LinkedIn profile. Connect with Gus, because when you connect with Gus, like Jim Barry, he's in here. I see him, right? I can invite 1,000 new people, and Gus can invite there's 200 or 300 people who come all the time, and Gus can start inviting you so that we make sure you're invited. But I begin to bring in a whole new group of businesses that you can engage with. So again, if you've been coming for a little while, more than 2 or 3 times, connect with Gus Phelps on LinkedIn. And then if you found today's training valuable, do me a favor on your way out, put thanks in the chat. Don't forget to connect with Gus. And last thing is, I want you to remember, government contracting is not a secret. It is just a process. Part of the process is us having a great weekend. I'm going to have one, and I wish you have a great one as well. See you.